Hello everyone, welcome to the second video in our series on yields, and today we're going to be talking about as purchased dollars and edible portion dollars. So this is where we're getting into how does that yield affect our price per pound or our price per liter or whatever, right? So because you pay for edible product and it's trim or waste it's waste when you purchase it, the true EP cost of ingredient is not the same as you paid for it originally, right? Unless it's 100% yield. We have waste, right? So a couple new terms. We now have AP dollars, which is the cost of our as purchased product. The carrots we talked about in the previous video, if we bought a 10-pound bag of carrots at $2.25 a pound, that $2.25 per pound is our as purchased price per pound of our carrots, right? Our edible portion cost, or our EP cost, is what's the new price once we take into account our loss, right? Once we look at what our true yield was, what is our new edible portion cost? And this is what we would use to cost recipes, because that's actually what our carrots are worth once they've been peeled, trimmed, and diced, right? So we have a slightly different triangle now, where we've actually inverted the AP and the EP. So as purchased dollars is now on the top and edible portion dollars is now on the bottom. So I'll get into a couple examples here in a minute, but I wanted to illustrate just a drawing of how this affects our price per unit. It doesn't affect our overall price of the case or the bag that we bought, but it's going to impact our price per pound, per gram, per liter, per milliliter. So if you look here, I've drawn in blue my beautiful drawing of a bag of carrots, right? So we bought a 50-pound bag of carrots for $2.25 per pound. So $2.25 times 50 pounds, we paid $112.50 for this bag of carrots. So what we did in our kitchen is now we peeled, trimmed, and diced them, and we were left with 40 pounds. Now, what are those 40 pounds worth? Well, we paid $112.50 for them, right? We still paid $112.50 for this bag. We just processed it, and we earned up with 40 pounds. 10 pounds went in the garbage, but we still paid $112.50, but now for 40 pounds. So our price per pound is actually $112.50 divided by 40, which gives us a price per pound of $2.81, if my pen works. Oops, $2.81 per pound. More than our AP, right? Because this is now an EP price. So this is the price that we would use if our recipe called for diced carrots. Now you can take this a little bit further and say turned carrots, we had a far less yield. We had 25 out of 50 pounds, that's a 50% yield, right? But how much did we pay for those 25 pounds of carrots? $112.50, right? But now we only ended up with 25 pounds, so $112.50 divided by 25 gives us a new price per pound of $4. Oh, pen, come on. $4.50 per pound. Notice the price went up every time we lost, our yield went down. Like this 40 out of 50, that was a yield percentage of 80%. So not a big difference in our as purchased to our edible portion, but as soon as this yield percentage starts dropping even more, our price goes up even more because more of our product is being wasted and going in the garbage. So this really affects how we cost a recipe. If we started using AP pricing to cost turned carrots in our recipe, we're out by 50%, right? We're losing $2.25 every pound, right? So it's super important that we use the edible portion value in our recipes. And we recognize that if we process something, we have less of it left, but it's worth more because we still paid, as in the example up here, each one of these we paid $112.50 for. It's just the value per unit goes up the less we have. Okay? So the first example I've got is what is the EP cost per pound for radishes if a 10-pound case costs $14.40 and a yield percentage is 86%. So first off, like all my questions, I keep saying identify the information you have, right? So our EP, what is our EP cost per pound if we have a 10-pound case and it costs $14.40, right? So our 10 pounds is AP, right? That's how we bought it. And our price, $14.40, is AP dollars, right? So, and our yield percentage is 86%. So, first thing we can do is we can look at our triangle. But now it's AP dollars over EP dollars times yield percentage. So, what's our yield cost? Well, it really doesn't matter what our AP amount is, right? We have enough information here to figure out what our EP cost is. Our AP was 14, come on, pen. There we go, $14.40 per pound. And we had a yield percentage of 0.86. So $14.40 divided by 0.86 is going to give us, oh, sorry, we don't have a price per pound. That's $14.40 for the whole case. My mistake. See, I'm jumping ahead. So we have $14.40 for the case. We don't have an AP price per pound. We have $14.40, which equals 10 pounds. So our price per pound is actually, it's divided by 10, this is divided by 10, $1.44 per pound, right? So 144, and our yield is still 0.86, so we need 1.44 divided by 0.86, which will give us a new edible portion price of 1.674 or $1.67 per pound, right? Now, our logic fact check, we started with $1.44 as purchased, and it went up to $1.67. That makes sense, right? Because we don't have the full 10 pounds. Some of it went in the garbage, so the value of what we have left, our 8.6 pounds, is $1.67 per pound. Our edible portion dollar amount should always be more than our as purchased dollar amount, or equal to. If our yield's 100%, it'll be the same. But if it is anything less than 100% yield, this edible portion, EP dollars, needs to be higher than our AP dollars. Okay, one more example to illustrate this, and that's what is the AP cost for heirloom tomatoes, budgeted at $2.17 per EP, per pound EP cost, with a 96% yield. So nice of them to identify that's already EP, right? We have our yield. So if we remember our triangle, AP dollars, EP dollars, yield percentage, dollars didn't come up there. So we have an EP of 217 and we have a yield of 0.96. We can multiply those out and we end up with an AP amount of $2.08 per pound. Now, this is less than our EP, which makes sense because our AP is always less than our edible portion cost, right? Edible portion cost is always more than our as purchased cost. Now, why do we have an example like this where we already know our edible portion cost? Well, maybe we're looking to compare, we know what our price is in our recipe, but we're looking to see what our heirloom tomatoes are costing if we buy them, right? So if we look at our price sheet from our supplier and our price for heirloom tomatoes is more than $2.08 per pound, we know we have to either change our recipe, recost our recipe, adjust our pricing, do something because we're paying more than we have budgeted with this $2.17 per pound. Okay. So in the last two videos, we talked about produce. We talked about our edible portion versus our as purchased portion, and then our edible portion cost versus our as purchased portion cost. In the next video, we're going to talk about how this applies to something that has usable byproducts. And usually what I'm talking about here is meat, right? If we buy a turkey for turkey breast, which you'll see in the example in the next video, how do we compensate for, well, we're going to use the legs and thighs in this, and we're going to use the carcass for stock, and these all have value. It's not going in the garbage. So it isn't a straight 50% yield off of our turkey. How do we compensate for that? How do we make sure that we aren't overcharging our customers because we have such a low yield percentage? And how do we make sure that we price our menu items fairly? All right, that concludes this video, and we'll see you on the next one.